I'd like to thank everyone for coming today for the third English colloquium of the semester. The English department sponsors this colloquium to give us a chance outside of the classroom to have an informal setting where we get to talk about books, reading, ideas, and the life of the mind in a casual setting, which in our mind is what the ideal liberal arts experience is about. So thank you all for coming out and participating. Today we're very fortunate to have a new member, relatively new member of the Centenary community, Professor Andia Augustin-Bily. I asked her to talk today because she brings to our campus worldliness, wisdom, and wit. She is a native of Haiti, but is indeed a citizen of the world, I believe. And we're very happy that she has come here after her graduate work at Washington University in St. Louis. She is also wise in that I think she brings to campus her specialty, which is to help us understand that there is literature outside of the English and American tradition. Foreign languages department know that. And we in English know that, but it helps to have colleagues who remind us of that. So thank you, Andia. Andia is also witty. Students know that, and I encountered that recently when she was talking about her class. What was it exactly? Sun, Sand, and Sex in Caribbean Literature. And I said, Andia, that sounds really good. I'd love to take that class. And she shook her head and said, you're way too old for that class. And I said, but I'd love to play tennis outdoors in the sun. She goes, oh, okay. Anyway, Andia, you're on.
All right, y'all, I'm super nervous. I am incredibly honored to have this crowd. You guys are, I know some of you guys are here because you were constrained or forced to be here, but I am going to pretend it's because I am the bomb. That's why you all showed up for this talk. So thank you so much. I'm going to remove my gum. Hold on. I would like to thank my colleagues over at the English department for this honor, notably the chair, Dr. Hendricks. So thank you so very much again. Here I go. Before I could read, I listened. I listened to melodious voices, thump, clapped, and swayed to the rapturous music that echoed through the walls of my father's church. The Béni soit l'Éternel, Alléluia, gloire à Jésus, ricocheted fervently when the songs or the sermon penetrated a receptive heart. I listened and listened some more. I listened, captivated by the stories of a Moses, able to kill and save at the same time. I listened with awe at the story of Samson, not only for his gargantuan strength, but for the woman, Delilah, fascinated by her subtle power and seduction. Later, when I could read, my fingers found their way through the Book of Solomon. And there, I discovered eroticism as illustrated in this passage. What a magnificent young woman you are. How beautiful are your feet in sandals. The curve of your thighs is like the work of an artist. A bowl is there that never runs out of spiced wine. You are as graceful as a palm tree, and your breasts are clusters of dates. To me, your breasts are like bunches of grapes. your breath like the fragrance of apples, and your mouth like the finest wine. Your braided hair shines like the finest, I have to do that, satin. Its beauty could hold the king captive. You are as graceful as a palm tree, and your breasts are clusters of dates. Then let the wine flow straight to my lover, flowing over his lips and teeth. I belong to my lover, and he desires me. Darling, I have kept for you the old delights and the new. That's in the Bible, y'all. Clusters of grapes, and this is in a abridged version. Clusters of grapes, blooming pomegranates, bag of myrrh, honey, milk, metaphors for genitalia, infused my senses. Vivid imagery that celebrated a woman's body, that gives voice to her passion and desires, all of which struck a chord in me. So I came to reading by listening, but I very much came to reading by transgressing, by unearthing the hidden and giving renewed vigor to what seems ordinary or silence. Now, my father had a library where dust among the rows and rows of books competed for eminence, where the torching heat of the Caribbean turned the pages into yellowed and crisp wafers. All of them were religious in nature, except for a collection of encyclopedias that I devoured. My world opened then to French writers and philosophers such as Rabelais, Descartes, Voltaire, Rousseau. Too young then, I failed to comprehend they were all white men. All white men. But my intellectual quest has begun. It would be years later, a junior in a small liberal arts college in Clinton, Tennessee, that my first formal encounter with Francophone literature began, setting the trajectory of my scholarly interest. Traditionally, French departments have adopted a Eurocentric approach to teaching language and literature, meaning they would teach Franco-Français writers who belonged to a purely French literature, to students who were primarily interested in purely French writers in a language itself supposed to be purely French. As time passed, some departments began to explore literary horizons that were more brown, adding a Francophone author to their syllabi or offering a course on Francophone literature. In my case, that's what happened. In taking a Caribbean and African literature class, I stumbled across a world of literature that validated my identity and gave me a sense of belonging as a person of color from the Caribbean. Reading the works of Mariam Abba, oops, sorry. Mariam Abba, Aimé Césaire, Marie Chauvet. I really shouldn't have my back against this completely because I don't see what the heck is happening there. Mariam Abba, Aimé Césaire, Marie Chauvet. What the? I'm too fast.
It's delicate.
Delicate, okay. Delicate. Mariam Abba, Aimé Césaire, Marie Chauvet, and Marie Scondé from Senegal, Martinique, Haiti, and Guadeloupe, respectively, was nothing short of a revelation. Through these writers, I was able to understand myself, my history, and all the cultures that have informed and shaped my thinking. In Discours sur le colonialisme, published in 1955, Caribbean thinker Aimé Césaire wrote, La colonisation, je le répète, déshumanise l'homme, même le plus civilisé. L'action coloniale, l'entreprise coloniale, la conquête coloniale, fondée sur le mépris de l'homme indigène, est justifiée par ce mépris tend inévitablement à modifier celui qui l'entreprend. Le colonisateur qui, pour se donner bonne conscience, s'habitue à voir dans l'autre la bête, s'entraîne à le traiter en bête, tend objectivement à se transformer lui-même en bête. Césaire was one example of a colonial subject speaking truth to power, but he wasn't the only one. I ultimately discovered a world that was unknown, yet very familiar at the same time. Short of revolutionary, it was amazing being exposed to a literature that was rich and diverse in a way unlike literature written inside the hexagon. Still, in all my classes, Eurocentric or not, women writers did not make it on the syllabi, or if they did, much like the Francophone writer, they'd be relegated at the bottom. Literally, this would be like the last week of class when class is dead and all of a sudden you're reading a work by a woman or an author from the Caribbean or Africa. I confronted that affront right on by beginning to think critically about the intersection of race and gender. Sexuality will come later. I learned that contrary to what Simone de Beauvoir has advanced, one does not become a woman just because she's a female. Ideologies of womanhood have as much to do with class and race as they do with sex. So, like most nerds do with any catastrophic or traumatic events in their lives, I took a class. I boldly, between you and I, though I was terrified as hell, walked into a feminist literary theory class reserved for upperclassmen. I was first year in grad school. That ranged from the holy trinity of French feminism, Hélène Sixou, Luce Irigaray, and Julia Kristeva, to Black third world feminists, Bell Hooks, Gloria Anzaldúa, and Chandra Tapalde Mohanty. There were also queer theorists like Judith Butler and Eve Sedgwick. So earlier I spoke about transgression, and I am going to close with this. As a pastor's daughter, the notion of sin, right and wrong, are deeply rooted in my psyche, much like the blood flowing through my veins. Yet, I transgressed by bringing to the fore marginalized literature due to sexual content or origin. I engage in excavating hushed issues through literature. Let me explain. In the Caribbean, the tensions and anxiety that surround same-sex relations emerge from the notion that same-sex desire is not compatible with the region's values and cultures. Across the Caribbean, belief persists that non-normative sexualities are a contamination from the US and Europe, a disease imported on cruise ships that threatens the national space. Focusing on how literature can help us imagine a diversity of sexualities in the Caribbean, my dissertation examined the representation of same-sex relations in contemporary Francophone literature. I demonstrated how the writers interweave homoeroticism, race, class, and gender in order to challenge conventional ideas about Caribbean sexuality. These writers' preoccupations with taboo topics and sociopolitical issues are as important to understanding the fabric of Caribbean society as understanding its cuisine, music, and art. Using various literary genres, historical perspectives, and news media, I investigate how the writer's homoerotic works, especially the representation of homoerotic bodies, transgress literary and sociocultural norms. Transgression, thus, is about crossing boundaries, moving into other spaces, and destabilizing the conventional, no matter how temporary these movements might be. And side anecdote, I worked on this PowerPoint presentation last night, and I'm Googling images on Google, and I'm like, LGBT Caribbean, and a bunch of white men came up in the Caribbean. I put gay Caribbean, a bunch of white men showed up in the Caribbean. I put black gay Caribbean. Still white folks showed up. So though I wrote this dissertation in 2015, this is very much in actuality. FYI. In conclusion, I learned, eventually through my training, to make literature work for me. I learned that those things that are close to my heart, whether it's issues of power, of gender, of class, of sexuality, of citizenship, transnationalism, issues of exclusion and inclusion, I can read about them, I can research them, I can write about them, but best of all, I can teach them. So my party words to you would be the same. Be adventurous in your readings. Go beyond what is available and comfortable. Probe and probe and probe some more. And you'll be completely transformed by the transcending power of literature to open up borders and build bridges. Thank you.
Time for questions, comments, suggestions.
I purposely kept this short so we can talk. Okay?
I gotta ask, how and why did you get to Greenville, Tennessee?
To Cleveland, Tennessee?
Yeah.
My parents are missionaries, and when we had to go to college, I was in New York and then ended up doing my senior year in Maryland. My dad told me that some pastor friends of the family recommended Lee University, which was a small Christian liberal arts. And of course, everything was framed within a religious sort of like justification. Like they didn't want us to go to college and be corrupt or, go worldly. And so college or university was this sort of like religious protective space. I'll be in college, but God will still be there. Little did they know. I mean, I didn't do anything bad, but it's college. Yes.
So I have two questions. So one is, as you started to discover, as you started to read different types of literature, and as it started to change your view and how you thought about things, did that have make you have conflicting emotions based off your upbringing? And then the second one is, so now that you're teaching Francophone, you're teaching sexuality-based classes and things like that, how do your parents view that?
My parents will conveniently not acknowledge anything that is remotely anything they don't want to acknowledge. That was not eloquent, however I just put it, but that's how my parents do. So my dissertation was on homoeroticism in Caribbean literature. My parents are very proud of me getting my PhD, but they never asked what I was writing on because I think my sister told them and they just decided that they will not bring that up because they don't want to confront that. So they conveniently do not engage with what I decided to write on. And so how I dealt with conflicting, I've always been a rebel. I never liked to conform just because I was brought up in such a strict environment. It's hard for me. You guys, some of you guys know me. It's so hard for me to just be like this, and I'm spontaneous, and sometimes I put my foot in my mouth like 99.9% of the time, and I want to shoot myself 99.9% of the time. And so growing up in Haiti was hard because my mom was very sort of like bougie, or very, you know, like you have to conform, like French, and she grew up in a convent. It was like all kinds of issues there. But the thing is, I transgressed, like I said, by reading. Reading was the way I transgressed, but I did not transgress through acting on anything else. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I was a good girl. I just transgressed through readings.
I guess my question is how the intersectionality of your race and your gender and your ethnicity and your sexuality and being like a very intelligent, assertive black woman in Louisiana has kind of like shaped the way that people perceive and treat you?
That's tough because I don't know how people treat me, although I would say I don't give people too much room to receive unfair treatment. I would say, for instance, when I open my mouth and I go somewhere here in Louisiana, people, as soon as I open my mouth, people will be like, "You're not from here." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not from here." And they're like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Okay, it's a little complicated." And, you know, so it's either I say I'm from St. Louis, because that was where I just moved from, or depending on how adventurous depending on how much time I have. If I were to say I'm from the Caribbean, then I need to explain which island and where the Caribbean is located. So typically it's too much, and so I just say St. Louis. Yeah.
So do you ever feel conflicted being a French professor?
There's a lot of big questions about them. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
And knowing of like the colonial history of the language?
Hell yeah.
And how do you reconcile that?
I hate French people. I totally think I'm just kidding.
Well, that's like the class right now is using rape as a metaphor for colonialism.
Yeah, did you hear what she said?
No, I didn't.
She's my student. Katie, you're gonna stand up and say that very loudly. Go ahead.
Well, Dr. Ave is teaching a class right now, an upper level literature class, where she uses rape as a metaphor for colonialism. So she talks about how they are literally raping the land and these people through colonialism.
What bugs me about French people is their lack of ownership when it comes to, and I guess we can sort of equate that to different situations, right? Where you are privileged, you don't have to account for certain things. So when I meet a French person and they are surprised that I speak French, they seem to have forgotten that they colonized a bunch of black folks. Or they have no idea about the Haitian Revolution. So for those of you who do not know, and you guys, it's okay, because you guys, it's okay, but French people do not know this. So Haiti was the first country, the first black nation to be independent. Haiti used to be the jewel of France. And Haiti became the first country to successfully revolt against the French. And it happened so far back in 1803 that French people do not remember, as opposed to the most recent countries that have been decolonized, such as Algeria in 1962 and Cameroon and so forth. And so last year, I invited some of the French students to come to the Haiti module with me, because I realized by talking to them that they had no clue about how Haiti's history is also their history. But they're not the only ones. Jacques Chirac, who was a former French president, denied France's ever colonizing Haiti. So how do I feel about the French? It's sort of like, what family member do you guys not like? I would say sort of like, you know, a family member that you, because you guys are too young to have mother-in-law, but it's sort of like your uncle who is creepy, but you sort of like him because his family told me. So when I see a French person, you know, there is that bond, that, you know, that the cultural connection. At the same time, when I am in France, I tend to be very sort of like, oh. So I would, whenever I talk about, you know, how Haiti got its independence, I would be like, yeah, and we massacred the French, and we killed the French. And this one time I did that, and he wasn't my husband yet at that time, but he was my fiance. My husband is much more proper in tone than I am, more politically correct. He's a lawyer, I guess, by training or whatever. I'm not. So I'm at this French people's home, and I'm talking about, yeah, we massacred them, and we killed them, and there was blood everywhere. And I was like really graphic about talking about the Haitian Revolution. And I feel my husband kicking me. And I'm like, why are you kicking me? They need to know this. Yeah, so that's me talking about the Haitian Revolution. To French people, I have no mercy. Yes, Professor.
I want to go back and pull from the question on intersectionality and the question on conflict and give you an opportunity to unite your identities. Because I think that when I think about my own experience, I don't just read as a woman, I don't just read as a Southerner, I don't just read as a transgressor. How do you, when you're reading, when do you acknowledge, or when do you recognize that you're reading as a Haitian, or that you're reading as a woman, or a transgressor, or?
That's a good question. It depends on the themes that resonate and grab me. Almost all the classes I have taught here since being here at Centenary have had to do with some of these themes that I want to flesh out or that I want to expose to my students. So for instance, in Haiti, we have issues of class that are tied to your color, your skin color. So reading a work by Marie-Vieux Chauvet, which we read in class, that would bring that aspect. If I were to read a text, say for instance by Edwidge Danticat, who in Le Cri de l'Oiseau Rouge talked about the testing and how mothers, even in African texts, mothers, they're like the guardians of, you know, the woman's body, because the woman has to arrive at marriage pure. That definitely resonated with me, because my mom was like, okay, no boys, and you know what I mean? So all these themes or all these things that either I have lived or that I have experienced, once I read and then they jump at me, that's when I'm like, okay, that's the identity. But then that's why they're intersectionalities, right? It's because I cannot remove my race from my gender or my sexuality or any of that stuff. And so they make like a nice sort of like mushy mashed potato type of thing.
There's a new title for an article.
Mushy mashed potato. Identity.
Intersectionality.
Yeah.
So there was a
So you titled this presentation like literature and gender, with how I read as a woman. But how do you feel? How do you feel that literature and like homoerotic bodies, like how do you feel that interacts with people who are like trans or like non-binary? You know.
This is not my. Whenever I was doing sexuality and gender studies, I did not focus so much on the transgender aspects. And so I am not going to say anything, Danny, that I don't know, that I'm not sure of. But what I can say is you can do the exact same thing that I did. I had to look like for these I had to find them in the text. They were literally buried. Some of the chapters that I wrote for my dissertation, sometimes the erotic parts were like a paragraph, or they were like 2 pages. They were not necessarily explicit because nobody wants to write on those things. They're transgressive. And like a Haitian author who is now part of the prestigious Académie Française, Daniel Laferrière, he said, nobody, in talking about Haitian authors or Korean authors, it was like nobody wants to write about those things because they don't want to be labeled as such. They're sort of like a crime by association. If you write on homoeroticism, you must be attracted. And so looking again at pictures yesterday, one of the pictures, I didn't like it because it was I didn't like it, I didn't put it up there, but one of the pictures that I saw when I did find a picture that had to do with Black people in the Caribbean who are gay, they were protesting LGBT Caribbean folks. You know, one of the what do you call those things? Signs, thank you. One of the signs says, keep your masculinity. Keep your masculinity. What does that mean? If you are attracted, if you are a man, you are attracted to another man, there is no way you could be masculine, right? So it's all these things that you can find in the text, and I am sure even now as transgender is becoming more present and more visible, that literature, if it's not coming out, and that's why one of the things that I use as a theoretical concept is queer. I talked about how I'm queering the text by putting on it either an interpretation that wasn't being done before, or by really pushing that text for that to come out more. So you can definitely queer those texts that you are interested in. I know, yeah, but we can talk later because I really don't want to say something that would embarrass me.
What were some of your earliest memories of reading, and what do you think Haitian culture regards reading as, like, positively or negatively? How do they regard reading?
Haitian culture definitely regards reading as important, crucial. Haiti has, education is sacred. For instance, my mom, who is a principal, when she and some of the kids who went to Haiti, they saw that my mom walks into a classroom, everybody stands up and says, "Bonjour, madame." This doesn't happen here in this country. My mom, her finger alone has so much power. Like, it's amazing how the hierarchy and the respect for a teacher, how, like, me walking on campus and students not acknowledging me as a professor, like, no, that would never happen. As a professor, as a teacher, so much prestige and respect are attached to you. And definitely reading is an aspect of that. So again, growing up, it was the Bible, but again, I didn't have to read the Bible because my siblings didn't read the Bible. I read the Bible because I loved to read. And so my early memories, I didn't talk about that because I had to keep this short. But I loved to read romance novels that I had to hide. So a lot of my memories have to do with reading in transgression, like they were together. Like reading transgression was like my life in Haiti, except for the Bible. But even the Bible, I was like reading things that I'm like, David and Jonathan, did they have something going on? You know what I mean? I would really queer the text and whether that was like intellectual curiosity or whether my mind was just wired differently, it was just a combination of that. I don't know, but I was always pushing beyond what hit the surface.
I have one last question, and maybe we'll let folks get on to class, and that is, Andia, how, if you're interested in transgression, and many faculty members are, right? On one level, faculty members are about teaching their students to question, at least, the status quo. I'm just interested, how can one take reading, how can one take a life in literature and the transgressive qualities of that, perhaps? How then do you live in the world where there is hierarchy, in a world where there is power, in a world where if you break the rules, there are consequences? Where is that border that you can walk? Or how do you accommodate that, and what kind of advice might you give to students who want to try to push, but maybe don't want to end up in jail or thrown out of school or kicked out of their house or what?
Yeah, don't break the law. I never break the law. It's one thing I will tell you. Let's start by that. Nobody's going to sue me because I told you to go transgress. No, I did not. I mean, I'm well lawyered up, but still. As a professor, so let me approach it by teaching first. I would say setting the stage. I think students who have taken my class have learned to expand their minds and there's a French person, y'all. Say bonjour. Bonjour. He had no idea. I love.
You didn't come 10 minutes ago.
I know, right? I love French people. Okay. Oui. See, that's I transgress all the time. I'm telling you, I cannot be. Okay. Okay. In my class, I was getting there. Okay. I would say setting the tone, like from the first day of class, for instance, whether it's teaching French 101 and teaching only in French, strictly in French, French 101. The day I walk into the classroom, completely in French, I set the tone. I think if you sort of like explain to the students that we are going to embark on a journey, and the journey is about you reading literature differently. It's about engaging with things that you did not think about, but that requires you being open-minded and really coach your students in slowly taking them there. In my syllabus on rape, gosh, we had to read about the genocide and how the Rwandan genocide and how rape was used as a tool of oppression. I did not put that number one because I know students would probably drop it. So I started with a text that was sort of like, less graphic, giving me time to sort of like, warm up the students to the theme, and then as we read, it gets more and more graphic. So for you guys who want to engage in transgressive behaviors, and that sound really, really bad, literally, right? We're talking about literature here, because DBS is like right outside. I would say, same application. You really need to think about what would you like to accomplish. Are you looking at Shakespeare differently because you would like to queer Shakespeare in a way that has not been done before? So therefore, let me see ways in which I can read the text differently or pick a theme, right, that has not been studied when it comes to Shakespeare and do it. But best of all, or most of all, it's the open-mindedness. You guys need to get the hell out of your comfort zones. When you guys are too freaking comfortable, you guys are not going to experience the world. And when I mean the world, I mean the world outside, but also the body of works of literature that are like out there. So for you guys to learn and push boundaries, right, you need to be able to have that curiosity and wanting to go beyond what is hitting at you, right? And coming to talks like these and talking to other people who are different, who look different, who come from different backgrounds. Really, like the transgressive aspects of reading or literature, it's a way, it's a behavior, it's a state of mind, it's a way of thinking. It's really you being curious about the world around you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andia.